And now we're going to get down some business. I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Sweet, my co-host and Washington Bureau Chief for the Chicago Sun-Times. Lynn.
Thank you, Laura. Joining us tonight is Congressman Rodney Davis, who will be speaking to us from the front porch of his home in Taylorville, Illinois. He's in his fifth term in Congress, and he's the ranking member on the House Administration Committee. He's a ranking subcommittee member on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and on the House Ag Committee. He's no stranger to the Capitol. He worked there for 16 years as a top staffer for now retired Representative John Shimkus. And we're talking to Congressman Davis just a short time after he decided to seek another term in the House to run for re-election and not consider other statewide options. Thank you for joining us, Congressman Davis. Welcome to At the Table.
Well, thanks for having me, Lynn and Laura. Appreciate you putting me on.
So I want to just kind of jump in some of the politics of what is going on now. I reported in my column today on how Congressman Mary Miller might end up having to run against you. Let me set this up for our listeners. In the Democratic drawn remap, basically 3 Republicans were put into 2 Republican districts. So Congressman Mike Boss has declared for one, Rodney Davis the other. And one other thing to know before I ask my big question, there are 5 members in the Illinois delegation who are Republicans. Adam Kinzinger's not running again. The 4 other incumbents are have all supported Donald Trump. And I want to just mention this as I'm asking the question, because in a run against Mary Miller, who is allied with some of the most strongest pro-Trump wing of the party, including Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Congressman, what difference would it make if Trump gets involved in your primary?
Well, first of all, Lynn, I'm pretty happy to be drawn into the new 15th district. I traveled to multiple counties that are new to me just today and had great meetings with local officials and just residents and hopeful constituents to be. I don't really worry about what anyone else is going to do. You've known me now for 9 years, Lynn, and I've had primaries and I've had almost probably upwards of $100 million spent for and against me in the 13th district in the last 5 races I've run. So we're going to just continue to do what we do, talk about our great constituent service operation, talk about how we've been able to make sure that we work with the Trump administration and President Trump to issue in the tax cuts of 2017 and 2018, and also talk about what we will do to fight back against the Biden administration's failure to address inflation, failure to address our border issues, and frankly, failure to address the crime problem that's devastating our communities and our cities like Chicago.
So before we get to some of those specifics, I want to just clarify, because CNN had a report that Marjorie Taylor Greene was trying to get Trump to make an endorsement in your race. So if he got involved, could you address if it would make a difference?
Well, anytime President Trump gets involved in a race, it amplifies a race. I certainly, as President Trump's co-chair of his campaign during the last race, somebody who campaigned with the entire Trump team during the Iowa caucuses, where I got to go to my old grade school in Des Moines, Iowa, and caucus at multiple precincts on behalf of the president. I would welcome his support. These are the issues that anybody has to face when you're looking at redistricting years. But as of now, I'm the only announced candidate in the 15th district, and frankly, the only incumbent who lives in the 15th district. In a lot of areas I now have in this new district are areas that I traveled in my previous job on a regular basis, and we've been able to have overwhelming support from Republican officials and officials that are not even affiliated with the party. And I'm looking forward to representing them in the next 2 years.
I just want to note for our listeners, if you live in Illinois, you can run in any district. It sounds kind of weird. I don't know why we have that rule, but that's what it is. So here is something that happened.
One thing, Lynn, just so your listeners know, I'm not running against Sean Cass and Marie Newman. Even though I can, I'm not going to do that.
And I won't come back to Illinois and pick a place to run. So we've done this, we got some business done. But today's news, A group of Trump allies from conservative organizations have renewed their call to kick Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney out of the Republican conference, which is what you call your huddle when you get together and pick your leaders and work on your issues. Yes, they're on the January 6th committee. Yes, they voted to impeach Trump. Yes, they're two Republicans who have carved out a distinct path for themselves. I think I've talked to you about this before, and you said you wanted them to stay in the conference, but now that these renewed cries have come out and the January 6th committee is issuing more subpoenas, I want to revisit this with you. Should Kinzinger and Cheney stay in the Republican caucus?
Well, first off, let me make sure that your viewers know that I was actually an original Republican appointee to the January 6th Select Committee. And keep in mind, this Select Committee is exactly what Speaker Pelosi wanted to happen. She did not want a true bipartisan commission that didn't have current members of Congress on it. She didn't want equal subpoena power. She wanted this partisan circus. I disagree with my colleagues Liz and Adam in accepting those appointments from Speaker Pelosi, and they know that. As a matter of fact, I spoke on the floor yesterday, or 2 nights ago now, in regards to the contempt resolution against Mark Meadows. We still don't have answers as to what is the speaker's role and what was the speaker's role in getting the National Guard to the Capitol on January 6th.
Oh, that, all fair enough, but let me just have a little, let's keep to my narrower question. Where we're parked at now, should Kinzinger and Cheney stay in the Republican caucus? What's your thinking on that?
And I'll answer that, but I appreciate you interrupted me a little bit. I do want to finish this thought though, Lynn. Speaker Pelosi has stopped the Sergeant at Arms, her political appointee, from abiding by a preservation order for communications leading up to January 6th. That office, the Sergeant at Arms, is directly under the oversight of my House Administration Committee. What is she hiding? Those are the questions that we're not seeing asked by anyone on that Select Committee. And that's my message to your viewers. We need to find out where the communications are. We can hear all about text from the White House, but we need to understand what was actually being discussed in the Capitol leading up to January 6th. Now,
So Congress,
to answer your question though, Lynn, I think.
but Congressman, before you move, so well, how would you propose to get at those answers? If not through this committee, through the work of the committee, how will we get the answers and get to really to the bottom of what happened on January 6th?
Well, the same way that the Senate investigated January 6th, they used the committees of jurisdiction to actually talk to those officials who were directly responsible, and they exercised their oversight responsibility. We're not doing that on the House side. The House Sergeant at Arms is the only House officer that's failing to comply with our preservation request, and we have no access to their texts. We have no access to their communication, and the only person holding that back is the Speaker's own appointee, her own legal counsel. Those things need to come out, and this 1-6 Select Committee is not asking these questions, and it's very frustrating to me because it's a direct offense to the brave men and women in the Capitol Police. Where I can tell you, the Speaker just today just said that she feels the Capitol is safer than it was on January 5th. I don't agree with her. I don't think there's been proper attention to what went wrong prior to January 6th, and this Select Committee is more worried about attacking President Trump and attacking former government officials than they are about getting the answers as to what happened on the complex and how the security failures were so miserable. But do you want me to answer your question, Lynn?
Yes, please.
All right, I'll answer your question. Look, I think it's a slippery slope. No, if 2 Republican members are kicked out of the Republican conference, it actually gives Nancy Pelosi more of a vote margin in the House. It allows Nancy Pelosi to appoint 2 more Democrats to the Energy and Commerce Committee. It adds to the Democratic majority. We can have our differences, and frankly, there's so many people with different constituencies that are in our conference, and the Democrats have the same issue. We've got to learn to be a Big Tent. I'm not happy that we had 2 Republicans take an offer from Speaker Pelosi to be on the Select Committee, and the Select Committee still is not asking the questions about security failures around the Capitol. But in the end, I don't want this slippery slope to then be used later to say, Are we going to kick members of the Republican conference out who voted with the squad to defund our military a few weeks ago? I mean, these are the questions that get asked when that slippery slope begins.
Okay, so you're okay with their staying in the conference. And I know the reference you just made because one of the Republicans who voted against the defense bill is none other than Mary Miller. So the extremes on both sides didn't like a bill that most every other member of Congress approved of. And that shows a strange kind of unity in their dislike of the measure, though, for very different reasons. Also want to point out before we move on that the two members that Pelosi rejected for the Republican picks, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, they voted against certifying the Biden election. And now it turns out that Jordan is a figure in the investigation. Okay.
Well, hold on. Jamie Raskin, who's on the committee, got up to object to President Trump's certification in January 2017. You had other members of this select committee that voted against certifying George W. Bush's victory in 2000.
The only thing is, and I know we're going on a slippery slope. Now we're talking about, though, in the context of an attack on the Capitol, not just objecting to stuff. So let me maybe just ask one related question about this, and then we could bounce to some local political stuff in Illinois, which we're all hungry to get to at. Why is, so I understand what you're saying. We have to figure out how to make the Capitol safe, and we have to figure out how it was vulnerable and how to prevent an attack. But why can't we also figure out what happened? What's wrong with subpoenaing Mark Meadows, who already gave thousands of texts to the committee to just ask him questions? You were part of the group that voted against holding him in criminal contempt. What's wrong with just getting him there to ask him questions about what he knows?
The same Mark Meadows provided thousands of texts, thousands of emails, thousands of communications, thousands more than what Speaker Pelosi will even provide to the Oversight Committee about conversations that her political appointee, the Sergeant at Arms, had leading up to January 6th. This is a political sideshow circus. The Select Committee is not serious. They only want to get the headlines to go after President Trump and his former employees, in this case, Mark Meadows. Look, I will tell you, as we look at this one instance, what does this say for future administrations when the chief of staff is going to have communications with the president, with people in the executive branch? And is this going to be a crisis, a constitutional crisis, whenever we have a change in the White House and versus who's in charge in Congress?
A worded question, but let me jump because I know we only have here a few
one thing real quick, Lynn, is, and I think those texts that Mark Meadows sent and they gave to the Select Committee clearly shows, I don't see where there was an organized effort that was coming out of the White House. That clearly is shown in the text, the thousands of texts, and many have been released publicly. And keep in mind, those who were released were very selective. So if that's all they have to prove an organized effort, I think it's again more of a partisanship issue than it is actually getting to the root cause of why the Capitol was so vulnerable that day.
Release might have been selected, but when they write what will be the history, presumably we'll see the whole thing. We're shifting gears quickly. Illinois politics right now, it seems, do you think we still have to find some more candidates in the Republican side to run for governor? We have 4 people in. Today's news is that the mayor of Aurora, maybe somebody billionaire Ken Griffin is interested in. What do you think of the field so far? And you decided not to run for governor. What should we be looking for?
Well, first off, I was open and honest with everyone who asked. My first preference was to run for re-election, but my political battlefield was going to be set by Democrats in Springfield. And now I'm running for re-election. I don't think it's my duty as a Republican in the congressional delegation, as a Republican in Illinois, to say whether or not we've got great candidates now or if anybody else should come in. That's going to be up to them. And one thing I will tell you is that I'll make a decision on who to support when the field is finalized and when petitions are filed. But at the same time, I think anybody in this field right now can beat J.B. Pritzker in a head-to-head matchup.
And why do you say that? Because several of the candidates are not exactly household names, and J.B. Pritzker has hundreds of millions of dollars at his disposal. So how are they, especially those who are not as well known, are going to overcome that kind of a hurdle?
Well, I think the final Republican nominee for governor and Republican nominees across the state are going to have the financial resources to compete. This is going to be a disastrous year for Democrats, and J.B. Pritzker has been a disaster as governor. This is a governor who has continued to just issue executive order after executive order. There are many issues that have gotten a lot of gubernatorial candidates traction because of J.B. Pritzker's ineptness. And I will tell you just personally, Governor Pritzker failed miserably during the pandemic when it comes to unemployment ID fraud. I was a victim of ID theft because somebody filed for an unemployment claim under my name. And instead of actually working with us, the governor decided to get butthurt and call me, say I was sniping at it, when that was clearly not the case. I wanted to work in conjunction with the governor.
What happened, Congressman, in terms of you being a victim? What happened?
I got a letter in the mail from the Department of Employment Security stating that somebody had applied for unemployment benefits under my name. I then got a card in the mail that was a debit card that would have been used for those benefits. I didn't get assistance for months on end from the Department of Employment Security. And even then I got one phone call that I asked if they could call me back. And I never got a call back because I was on the runway in Chicago getting ready to take off to go to DC and I couldn't talk. But I had to go to the Federal Trade Commission's website. I had to go register as somebody who's a victim of ID theft. I had to put all my information in to put a freeze on my credit report. And can you imagine being a senior citizen having to go through these things where you can't get anybody on the phone because no one was there in the office, and they're trying to go online?
Right. No,
So
I agree that how the COVID benefits were administered and there was chaos on the unemployment benefits last year. But as we close out, you talk about a Republican field in 2022, you don't even have a Republican out there running for senator. And Tammy Duckworth is up for another term. What's going to happen on that one?
Well, I think we'll have Republican candidates up and down the ticket. Actually, I don't think. I know we will.
Who? Name some names. There's no blue chip name I've heard to run for the Senate on the Republican side. When will this person make themselves known?
Well, I serve with a lot of people in Congress who didn't start as blue chip names, myself included. These are races that will be determined in the next few weeks. Keep in mind, it was the Democrats that decided to push the primary back to June because they didn't complete their job with their supermajority to draw legislative maps.
But however we got there, we are here for a June primary. And I think given all the interest in running against Governor Pritzker, where you have 4, possibly 5 candidates, maybe more, don't you find it interesting that no one is talking about running against Senator Duckworth?
No, I don't find it interesting. I think the delay with the holidays now being happening, I think it just automatically puts family issues for people above politics. And frankly, most Illinoisans and most Americans for that matter, they don't live and breathe the politics and a red team and a blue team. They're just going on with their lives. And frankly, I think they'll care about the Senate election when the primary comes. And I really think they'll care about the Senate election and the entire election process in November of 2022.
And speaking of teams, as we close out our time with Congressman Rodney Davis, he is a baseball player on the House Republican team. Can you remind me, what position do you play?
I'm one of the younger guys, so they make me catch.
Well, things to know about Congressman Rodney Davis, who joined us tonight from Taylorville, Illinois, from the front porch. Congressman, thanks very much. The best to you in the new year.
Thank you both. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you. The same to you.